We're in the Gemara today on Daf Chav Daled. We're holding a couple of lines from the top where it says V'hai B'Kodesh. The first word in the line is Shabbat Torah. So we had over here a discussion that started from a Talmud that was sitting in front of Rab Shmuel bar Nachmani, and he was repeating something in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Because the Gemara before brought three opinions from where we know that whenever the Torah says Achila, it means Hana as well. And this is, most cases actually are an exception to that. But we brought a few opinions before. Chizkiya says it's because the Torah writes Yei Ochel. That's why we know by Chametz and Shera Niskal that it means Isser Hana. Then we had the opinion of Rabbi Vahu. And in Rabbi Vahu itself, there were two opinions. One is that you learn it out from Nevela. The fact that by Nevela the Torah has to write a special heter means that everywhere else, which would be by Chametz and Shera Niskal, it means Isser Hana. The third opinion was that you learn it out from Treifa, because the Torah there says Lakelaf Tashlichon Oisai, so I know that everywhere else it would mean Isser Hana. But Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, as the Gemara pointed out, didn't hold of any of these opinions. He learned it out from a pasuk that it says by a psul of the karbonis. What kind of a psul? By a carbon chatas, a chatas that's supposed to be brought, this blood is supposed to be sprinkled outside. It was brought inside into the heichal. What does the pasuk there say? The blood that was brought inside, lo yiseyachel be'eish tisarif. You can't eat it and you have to burn it. So the question is, why does the Torah have to say this? It already says in another place, v'hinei sayraf, that it has to be burnt. So be'eish tisarif, the fact that it says there that you shouldn't eat it and you have to burn it is an extra pasuk. And the Gemara says, Eina inyan. If this is not here to teach us b'negeya to the isser of eating this carbon that was brought inside, we use it for teaching us and everywhere else when the Torah writes the isser achila that it includes isser hana as well. That was the drasha. So now the hamshach of the Gemara here, the Gemara is going to point out that l'chayre that pasuk is needed for something. It's not extra to teach me this. The Gemara is going to go through various different sources that we find psukim by karbanis, where it says that you're not allowed to eat it and it should be burnt. And the Gemara is going to go through if it's extra, if it's not extra, could it be used for this drasha? So let's start with the first Indian here. This pasuk, is it true that it's extra and therefore it's being used to teach me for the rest of Torah that when it says the Isser Achila, it includes Isser Hana as well? Don't we need this pasuk here for karbanis itself? Look at the Rab Shimon. What did Rab Shimon say? The Tanya Rab Shimon Oimer B'Kodesh B'Eish Tisarif. When the Torah says in holiness, in the place of holiness, in the Azara, that's where you burn it. Limit al Chatas. This teaches me regarding this Chatas that became puzzle. Sheser Fenoisa B'Kodesh. Where do you burn it? It has to be burnt in the Azara itself, in a holy place. So we see that we need this pasuk. We do know already that it has to get burnt because it says that on the other pasuk V'hinei Seirav, but the location of where it gets burnt, that I learn out from here, B'Kodesh. Then that Braisa continues. Ve'ein le'ela zubulvad. I would only know that this carbon has to be burnt in a holy place if it gets puzzle. Psule koche kochim. Any other psulim of koche kochim. There's all kinds of psulim that could be by koche kochim. So any other kind of psul of koche kochim that have to be kept in the azara, all parts of koche kochim have to be kept in the azara, whether the part that's brought in the mizbeach, whether the part that the kayanim eat, it's all eaten only in the azara. So if it becomes possible, the place to burn it is also only in the azara. Or ve'emure kachim kalim. The kachim kalim, so the part that the kayanim or the owners can eat from the kachim kalim, where could they eat that? Anywhere in Yerushalayim. But the emurim are the sacrificial parts, the parts that are brought in the mizbeach. That is always kept only in the azara, on the mizbeach. So even if it becomes possible, it has to be burnt. Minayim, from where do I know that it has to be burnt only in the azara? Talmud Loimar, I learned it out from what it says in this pasuk, v'chol. The beginning of the pasuk it says v'chol, and then in the end of the pasuk it says b'kodesh be'eish tisarif, meaning that all psulim of kachim have to be burnt only in the azara. So the question of the Gemara is, it's not an extra pasuk. How could I say I learn out from here for other places in Torah that when it says Isser Achila, it's also Asa B'Hana? This was the question that Rab Shmuel bar Nachmani asked to this student that brought this drasha in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Amalei, so the student answered back and said, Rabbi Yonasan Rabach, so not in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, but he said in the name of Rabbi Yonasan, your teacher, Mahai Krakam Allah. He learned it out from the following pasuk. Another pasuk that it says regarding a psul of karbanis, and it seems to be extra. What is that? V'im yivaser mipsar hamiluim u'min alechem adabayker. if there'll be leftovers of the karbanis of the miluim, or from the bread until the morning. So this becomes naisar. Then what does the pasuk say over there? So the conclusion of the pasuk is v'sarafta es hanaisar be'eish. You got to burn it. Lo yeyachel ki kaideshu. So the Gemara says she'ein talmud loyma lo yeyachel. When it says that you don't eat it, it's extra, as the Gemara will point out in a moment. Ma talmud loyma lo yeyachel. Why does it have to say here not to eat it? Im einoi inyin legufe. If it's not needed to teach me right here. Because the aksiv, the pasuk says right here, v'sarafta es hanaisar be'eish. It's telling you to burn it. If you have to burn it, obviously you can't be eating it. So that's extra. Lo yachal is extra. So it's teaching me when it says lo yachal, as we pointed out before, im eni legufay, we put it on somewhere else in the Torah. And v'meine inyan la'achile, if I don't need it to teach me regarding other isurim in the Torah that it's also to eat because it says it there clearly. From here I learn out that whenever the Torah writes isar achile, it also includes isar ano. Now, would I say that just like over here regarding this naisar, the halacha is that you're not allowed to eat it and it has to be burnt? Do I apply the same thing regarding other yisurin in the Torah that it has to be burnt? No, but the Torah here says v'sarafta es hanaisar. It's only the naisar that's burnt. The Torah could have just said v'sarafta, burn it. It said before that it was left over till the morning. Why does it have to say v'sarafta es ha-naisar? Naisar b'sreifa, only naisar. Are you not allowed to eat, then you have to burn it. Ve'en kol yisurin sheb'teira b'sreifa. The rest of the yisurin of Torah that we're learning out to them, that it's asa b'hana, does not have to be burnt. So this is the source that he said we learn it out from this pasuk by naisar. Said it in the name of Rabbi Yonasan. So again on this, the Gemara is going to ask that it's not an extra pasuk. I do need this pasuk for naisar itself. Frag the Gemara, this pasuk lo yachal is extra. This is what it's coming to teach me. I need this lo yachal for what Rabbi Lazar says. The Amar Rabbi Lazar says lo yachal ki kaideshu. It should not be eaten because it's kaidesh. Kol shebekaidesh pasul. Anything that has a psul in Kaidesh, what is the pasuk here teaching me? Ba kasav litin loisesa al achilosai. The Torah here is coming to say that there's a lav. If when you eat any psulei amukdashim, there's many cases of things that become pasul in Kaidesh. Anything that became pasul, if you eat it, there's a lav. In other words, if it would just say v'sarafta, that you have to burn it, I would know you're not allowed to eat it. But v'sarafta is a mitzvah saseh, that you have to burn it. From where do I know that there's also a lav if you eat it? So when the Torah here says lo yeyachal ki kaideshu, and it adds the words ki kaidesh, it's actually saying a lav, not only regarding this case of naisar, but it's telling me a lav regarding anything that becomes pasul by kachim, that you're not allowed to eat it. There's a lav. So that's what it's coming to teach me. It's not going on the rest of Torah. Abaye, so Abaye says, so we have to learn it out from a different place. So here the Gemara goes back to the first pasuk that it brought, by the carbon chatas, where the blood was brought inside the heichal. Let's go back to the previous pasuk that we brought, and our question was, why does it have to say be'eish tisaref? So there the pasuk says that loise yachel be'eish tisaref. And ve'epech, and let's say the opposite of what we said before. Before the Gemara said be'eish tisarif is extra because it already says v'hinei sairif, that we know that we have to burn it. So be'eish tisarif is extra. Now the Gemara says no, it's not. Be'eish tisarif is not extra. Ve'epech, let's say the opposite. The lichtov be'eish tisarif. Be'eish tisarif, the Torah has to write. Right? The Gemara pointed out before because it's telling you the location of where it has to be burnt. It has to be burnt inside the azara. But what is it that we do? What's extra in that pasuk? V'loi boy loy sayachal. It doesn't have to say loy sayachal, the lav, that you're not allowed to eat it. That's not necessary to say. Why not? Because I know the lav, that anything that's possible you're not allowed to eat. We just brought from Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar says, when it says lo yeyachal ki kaideshu, from there I learn not a lav for all things in kachim that become possible that you're not allowed to eat. So loy sayachal that it says here is extra. Why does it say lo sayachel? I don't need it for that pasuk itself. Why not? The nafkalem de Rabbi Lazar. As we just said before, we learned out from Rabbi Lazar that said that by all psulei mukdashin, I learn out from lo yeyachal ki kaideshu. So taneyu inyan l'chol isurin shebetayre. So I learn out from here, from this lo sayachel, which is extra for all isurin of the Torah, the isur achila. Now, if I don't need it to teach me for the other Yisurim in the Torah, the Isser of Achila, I use it for the rest of Torah to teach me the Isser of Hana. And again, the Gemara clarifies, like we said before, I would think that all Yisurim of Torah that are Asa Bahana, there's also an obligation to burn it. Only regarding Noiser that you have to burn it, but not all other Yisurim in the Torah that you have to burn. So by Noiser, and actually by Korban Chatos, that the blood was brought inside that you have to burn, but from Noiser I have a miyut to exclude that all the other Yisurim in the Torah, you don't have to burn it. So this is what Abaye said. We go back to the pasuk of the Korban Chatos, where the blood was brought inside. From there I learn out Leisa Achel is extra. Rav Papa Abaye says Rav Papa to Abaye, no, Leisa Achel is not extra either. The Eime, I would say, let's say, Liyichudi le lav lugufa yudasa. It's coming to specify specifically a lav for this case where the blood was brought inside and you're not allowed to eat it. Why do you need a special lav? If you learn it out from the general lav that it says, Lo ye yachal ki koydeshu, like Rabbi Lazar said, why do I need a special lav over here? The Rabbi Lazar, because if I would only have that general lav of Rabbi Lazar that includes all kachim that becomes pasul, so we have the following rule: Ein loikin a lav shebachlalos. When the Torah writes a lav that includes many different cases in it, you don't get malchus for that. Malchus is only if the Torah writes a lav in a case where it's saying it specifically for one specific case. So that lav lo yachal ki koydeshu, you don't get malchus for it. So maybe here the Torah is repeating again lo yisei yachal to say that if you eat this, you get malchus. So it's not extra. Elam Rav Papa, so Rav Papa brings a third pasuk, a third case. Mehacha, from the following pasuk. And here it's going to also talk about kachim that became pasul. How? By becoming tomei. V'habasar asheyiga b'chol tomei. Basar that became tomei, lo yachal, you can't eat it. Be'eish yisarif, it has to be burnt. So that's lo yachal be'eish yisarif. So again, the Gemara says this is an extra pasuk. She'ein talmud lo yachal. It does not have to say lo yachal because I know that if it's tomei, you're not allowed to eat it. How do I know? The Gemara will explain now. Ma talmud lo yachal. Why does the Torah have to write it? Imeina inyan legufay. If I do not need the pasuk to teach me that a carbon which is tomei, that you're not allowed to eat it. The ha nafkele mikal v'chaymer mi meiser hakal. I learned this out with a kal v'chaymer from meiser that's much lighter, much more lenient than kachim, and still by meiser, if it's tomei, there's a law that you're not allowed to eat it. And I say as follows: Uma meiser hakal omre Torah. If when it comes to meiser, what does the Torah say? Lo biyarti mimenu betomei. I did not eat it while I was tomei. B'sar kodesh. So if it comes to kachim, to karbonis, that is chomer, that's much more stringent, like kol shekain. Most definitely, you're not allowed to eat it. So I could learn out the isser of eating kachim, which is tamei, with a kal v'chaymer. So I don't need the pasuk lo yachal. But the Gemara interjects and asks right away, but could you learn out from a kal v'chaymer? Would that be enough? V'chi teime, if you'll argue and say, ein mazhirin min adin. You can't warn and then give a punishment for any lav based on a kal v'chaymer. Kal v'chaymer cannot be used for such a purpose. All right, so how can we use a kal v'chaymer here to say that I learn out from meiser that you're not allowed to eat the kachim that became tomei? Says the Gemara, it's not only a kal v'chaymer, hekeshehu. It's actually a hekesh. We see in one pasuk the Torah puts meiser and kachim together, and so that hekesh teaches it to me, so I don't need the pasuk lo yachal. The Chsiv, there's in a pasuk where it says, "Leisucha lechol b'sharecha," do not eat in your cities meiser. So it begins with meiser, the gancha tireishcha v'tzerecha, various different kinds of meiser, or b'chayr is bekarcha, and then a carbon b'chayr. The conclusion of this pasuk is it talks about v'chol nidarecha shetidar v'nidveisecha. So nidarecha and nidveisecha refers to karbanis. So in the same pasuk, it's speaking about karbanis and meiser. Why is it comparing the two? It's comparing the two to tell me that just like by meiser, you can't eat it when it's tamei, I can't eat kachim when it's tamei. So this is a hekesh. With a hekesh, I could give a hazhara through a hekesh. I could give a warning through a hekesh. It's not just a kal v'chaymer. So if so, the question comes back, ma tamad loymar lo yachel. So when it says lo yachel regarding the basar that became tamei, it's extra. So if I don't use it for this itself, I can use this to teach me for other yisurin in the Torah, and if I don't need it to teach me for other yisurin in the Torah that they're also to eat, because I know that. So this is the source that for other yisurim in the Torah where it writes the isser achila, it also includes the isser hana. Again, the Gemara concludes, imakan b'sreife. Just like here, the pasuk says that it has to be burnt. I would think, af kol yisurin shebetayre b'sreife, by other yisurin in the Torah has to be burnt as well. O makra ha noiser b'sreife, ven kol yisurin shebetayre b'sreife. Only by noiser do you burn, and not other yisurin in the Torah. This was the source that Rav Papa brought from the pasuk where it speaks about the basar of kachim that become tamei and lo ye'achal is extra. Amalei Ravina Ravashi says Ravina to Ravashi. How do you know this is extra? How do you know this lo yachal is extra? Ve'eme laver olav b'shnei lavin. Perhaps the Torah here is writing lo yachal to tell me that when you eat basar of kachim, which is tamei, you'll be over two lavin. One lav that you learn out from leisucha lechel b'sharecha, you learn it out from what it says by Ma'aseh Sheni, and the other lav that you learn out over here, the Torah is saying that you're over two lavin, you get malchus twice. Maybe the Torah wants two lavin. How do you know it's extra? And the Gemara brings an example for this. Lav mi Omar Abaye. Did Abaye not say, Ochal putisa, a person that eats a putisa? A putisa is a kind of fish or something that's in the water. Some kind of a shed that's in the water though. So loika arba, you get 4 times malchus. And Rashi brings the psukim, it says in the Torah 4 different times, the Isser, once in Vayikra, once in Parshas Re'eh, and it says it a few times, 4 times that you get malchus for a petisa. Namala, if you eat an ant, like a chamish, so that's a sheretz ha'aretz. So in addition to the lavin that it says regarding sheretz b'chlal, by sheretz ha'aretz it says 5 times the Isser, and therefore you get 5 times malchus. Tzira, if you eat a tzira, which is a sheretz ha'oif, it's flying. Some taich tzira has a hornet. But either way, it's a sheretz that's flying, like a sheish. For that you get 6 times malchus. So I see over here that the Torah not only gives you a lav twice, you get twice, but you get up to 6 times a lav of malchus regarding one case of eating a tzira. So maybe over here, when you eat the kachim, which is tamei, how do you know that the lo yachal is extra? Maybe the Torah is writing that to get twice malchus. Amalei, so he answered him and said, no, don't suggest this. Kol heiche de ikele midrash. In any situation that you could darshan, you could explain the pasuk that it's going on something else, darshina, we put it on something else. We never go and establish it for an extra lav if we have another option. In the cases you just quoted, it's because that's what the Torah is saying, and there is no other place to put it on. So we know that you get once, twice, up to 6 times malchus. But if you could put it on something else, we do put it on something else. Okay, now that the Gemara brought up this pasuk, where it talks about the basar tamei, so the Gemara is going to go through this pasuk itself and point and explain some things that seem to be extra in this pasuk. Vahabasar asheyiga b'chol tamei lo yeyachel. So what did we just say? What is this pasuk really coming to teach me? It's not coming to teach me about the lav of not eating the kachim, which is tamei. That we learned out from Meiser. It's just coming to teach me regarding kol ha'Torah kula about the isser hana. So the Gemara's question is, the reishe lomali, the beginning of the pasuk, why is it needed? And Rashi says the Gemara's question is veha basar. That word veha basar, it's extra. Because really it's not teaching me anything about the meat of the carbon itself. It's teaching me kol ha'Torah kula. So why does it have to write veha basar? Could just say asher yiga b'chol tamei lo ya'achal. Or maybe the Gemara's question is, later on Rashi says that the Gemara's question is on the vav veha basar. Why does it say the extra vav there? And it says the Gemara l'rabais eitzim u'levaina. This pasuk is teaching me something also regarding kachim, that even the wood of the karbanis and even the levaina, which was brought together with the lechem apanim, both of them are not edible things, yet it could become tamei, which is a chiddush that we find only by kachim. Usually the halacha is something which is edible becomes tamei, or a keli becomes tamei, but over here you're talking about wood or the levaina, which is a kind of spice that's not edible, and it does not usually become tamei, but over here regarding kachim, it does become tamei. Then, what does it say in the continuation of the same pasuk? V'habasar kol tahor yochal basar. If you're tahor, then you eat basar. The seife, this is the end of the pasuk. Lamali, what is this teaching me? What do I need the v'habasar in the end of the pasuk? L'rabais emurim. It's coming to tell me regarding the emurim that if a person which is tamei eats the emurim, so then he's over on this lav. It's telling me not to eat this the emurim if a person is tamei. So Rashi says that a person that eats the emurim will actually be over two different lavin over here, because we're talking about anybody that eats the emurim. What are the emurim? The emurim are the parts of the karbanis that are brought in the mizbeach. Nobody is ever allowed to eat the emurim, even a kayan. It's supposed to be burnt in the mizbeach. So if you eat it, there's one isser of eating it. Anybody that eats it is considered to be a zar. You're not allowed to eat it. Besides that, if it becomes tamei, so then you're going to be over on two lavin over here for eating this. Okay, so that's what the pasuk is teaching me over here. Asks the Gemara, is this where you learn it out from? Emurim mihasam nafke. If a person eats from the emurim, so you learn it out from this pasuk. I learned it out from somewhere else. Again, emurim mihasam nafke. I learned this out from another pasuk. The Tanya, we learned in Abraisa, v'hanefesh. It's actually the very next pasuk there. So the pasuk says, v'hanefesh asher teichal basar mipsar zevach ashlamim. Asher la Hashem, if you can eat from the meat of the carbon shlamim, that belongs to Hashem, meaning it's supposed to be burnt on the Mizbeach. L'rabbi says emurim. The pasuk there is teaching me that you're not allowed to eat the emurim that's supposed to be burnt on the Mizbeach. And to the Gemara, no, there's a difference. Hasam tumas haguf. There, it's talking about a person that became tamei, and it's saying if the person becomes tamei, he's not allowed to eat from the karbanis, the kares, and there's actually a chiyuv kares if the person is tamei. Hacha betumas basar. Here, when it says vahabasar kol tahar yoichal basar, it's talking about the fact that the basar itself has to be tahar, not if the basar itself, the meat itself, became tamei. And belav, over here, there's no isakaris. Over here, it's only a lav. So it's two different things: if the person became tamei, or if the basar itself became tamei. Okay, this was a side detail. The Gemara explains this pasuk since we brought it up. Now the Gemara returns to the general sugya, discussing things that are asa ba'achila, things that are asa b'hana, and the Gemara here will talk about how you're over this isser and the exceptions of a person eating or having hana and he won't be over the isser. Amar Abavav, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Kol Yisurin Shebetayre, all of these Yisurin Shebetayre that we spoke about before, Ein Loiken Aleyan Elo Derech Achilasam. The malchus that you get is only if you eat them in the usual way that you eat food. Lemu'ute mai, what would this come to exclude? Amar Rav Shimi Barashi, lemute, the exception would be, for example, Shem Ochal Chelev Chai, if you take fats which are not allowed to eat, and you eat it raw, shepater, you'll be pater. Since it's not the usual way you eat fats, it's usually cooked up, if you eat it raw, you'll be pater. And this is one example. The Rambam gives another example. If a person eats food and he puts something very bitter into the food, that it's something that a person doesn't usually eat it this way, so you'll also be pater. It's not the way you usually eat it. If you eat anything shaloi kederech achilasan, you're pater. This was the statement of Rabbi Yechanan. Now the Gemara says, others said it differently. Ikke da amri, others said, Amar Abavav, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Kol yisurin shebeteire, all of the yisurin in the teire, ein loiken alein ela derech hana'asan. We're not only talking about the Isser of Achila, that only regarding things that you eat, that you have to eat them in the regular way in order to be over the Isser Achila, but even regarding Isser Hana, that you're not over the Isser Hana unless you have Hana of it in the regular way. Lemute mai, what does this come to exclude? Amar Rav Shimi Barashi, lemuute, this excludes a case, she'iminiach chelev shel sheir haniskal, you took fats of a sheir haniskal. Sheir haniskal was an example of something which is asa b'hana, as we quoted before in the Gemara. So you took these fats, and you placed it al gabe makasa, a person has a wound, and he anoints his wound with this chelev. Shu pater is going to be pater. Why is he pater? So as Rashi says, this fat is not made to be used for this purpose. It's made to be used as fuel for fire, Rashi says, or it's made to be used to oil the hides of animals, to be able to slide it off from the animal, but it's not made to use as a healing. So a person that used it to heal himself with it is not the usual way it's used, and therefore you're going to be pater. So we have an argument here. The first way, that the first version of what Rabbi Yechanan said, this concept of shaloi kederech, that you're doing it in the unusual way, is only regarding achila, only regarding eating, but not regarding hana. Hana you would be over in any way. Yes kederech, shaloi kederech, doesn't make a difference. The second opinion here, in the second version of Rabbi Yechanan says, even regarding hana, if it's shaloi kederech, you're not going to be over. Sagt the Gemara weiter, The kol shekain, according to the second opinion, the kol shekain oichel chaylev chay shu potter. The second opinion holds if having hana of something shaloi kederech, you're not going to be over. Needless to say, for sure, when you eat something shaloi kederech, that you'll be potter. But the first opinion holds only achila shaloi kederech, but not hana shaloi kederech. It will be aser. It menami yomer avacha bariv yomer avasi yomer Rabbi Yechanan. You take the fats of this sheira niskal, you place it on a wound, potter. The fish call isurin shebeteira, all isurin in the teira ain leiken alein ela derechanasan. You only get malchus if it's done in the usual manner. It's used in the usual manner. Okay. Rab Zeira says Rab Zeira, Afana nami tanina. I'll bring you a source for this from a brayse. What does it say in the brayse? Ain seifkin esar boim. You do not get malchus mishum arla for arla. Now arla is also one of the isurim, which is asa bahana as well. You don't get malchus for eating arla ela ala yaitze min azeisim umin anovim. If you have oil or wine that you squeezed from olives or grapes, bulvad, that's something that you're going to be over on drinking from the arla fruits. However, if you squeeze juice from berries, figs, or pomegranates, loy. That's something that people don't usually squeeze juice from it, and therefore it's not like the derech, it's not the usual way to eat them, so you're not going to be over. So my time, this is what it says in the Brayse. So my time, don't you think the pshat here is lav mishom de loy ka'achalu derech hanasan? Because he's eating these fruits, the berries or the figs or the pomegranates, not in the usual way. People don't usually squeeze juice from it, at least not in the time of the Gemara. So Amalei Abaye says, Abaye, no, this is not, you can't prove anything from here. Why not? If this Braisa would tell me regarding the fruit itself, that he ate the fruit in an unusual manner, he didn't eat it in the usual way, shaper, then you would have a good proof for this. And Rashi gives an example. Rashi says, let's say someone takes nuts, egoizim, walnuts, or afarsikim, peaches, and he eats them, he cooks them, and then he eats them. Right, so this is not fruits that's eaten usually cooked. They're usually walnuts or peaches are usually eaten raw. So a person takes something that's usually eaten raw and he cooks them. Or for, let's say, a person eats a potato raw. So that's not usually the way it's eaten. So then I would agree with you that you have a raya from this price that I see that shaloi kederech hana'asan, you're not going to be over. But Ela hacha, over here the case is different. Mishum dezeya ba'al mahu. Over here the person is squeezing the juice and he's not eating the fruit itself. It's a derivative from the fruit. He's just squeezing out the juice. The juice that comes from these fruits, which are not commonly used in this way, you're not over because it's zeya ba'al mahu. It's considered to be just like the sweat of the fruit. It's not the substance of the fruit itself. The Torah says it's only asa to eat the substance of the fruit itself. But this, when you just squeeze out the juice of it, it's not the fruit itself. It's only like a sweat of the juice, and of the fruit that is, and therefore you're not going to be over. That's the reason. So it's not simply shalei kederech hana'asan, it's much more than shalei kederech hana'asan. It's only the zeya of the fruit. Whereas when you come to wine and oil, which is the way these fruits, the olives and the grapes, are usually used for that purpose, so that is the fruit itself. But squeezing juice of something that's not usually meant for this, it's not even considered to be like you're having hana from the fruit itself, and that's why you're not over. So there's no raya to the case that we were speaking about before. Amar Abaye says Abaye hakoil meidim. Everybody would agree. So we had two versions before on what Rabbi Yechanan said, whether this rule applies only to eating, that you have to eat it in the normal way, or it applies to hana, any benefit, that the benefit should be in a normal way. So Abaye says, now everybody would agree, the klai hakerem, the isser of klayim, when you plant two things that are not allowed to be planted together, shaloiken aleyan, so for this you will get malchus, afile shaloik kederech hana'asan, even if you had a na of it, not in the usual manner. So you get malchus, right? So kilayim is something also which is an isser ana. We didn't bring this up before in the whole sugya when we discussed all the different examples of isser ana. Was not brought up before, and the reason is, as Rashi points out over here, by kilayim the Torah never uses the term achila. It says pentikta shamaleya. It's what? You're not allowed to plant it, but then after you plant it, you're also not allowed to have a na of it. So but you're not allowed to have a na of it, even shaloi kederech hana'asan. My taime shundalek siv bo achila. The Torah never uses the term achila. So what you see over here from this Gemara is, going back to what it said in the beginning here, the whole source of the fact that when you eat something, shaloi kederech achila, or you have a na of something, shaloi kederech hanaasa, and the reason why you're not over is because the Torah describes the isser as achila. Don't eat it. And when the Torah writes don't eat it, it means in the usual way that a person eats. But if the Torah tells you the isser not to eat it or not to have a na, and it doesn't use the term achila, it just says tikdash, that it's holy in the negative sense, that you're not allowed to have a na, so then that includes in any way that you derive benefit, whether you get a na of it in the normal way or in the abnormal way. So therefore, regarding kilayim, it doesn't make a difference. Okay, we'll stop over here. Let me just conclude with a famous shaila that the Mishnah Lamelech asks. He says the Gemara here discusses b'negeya to isurim, whether you're over when you eat something which is not in the regular way, or you have a non, not the regular way. How about b'negeya to a mitzvah? If you eat matzah or any other mitzvah that you chayev to eat, and you eat it in the unnormal and in the irregular way, are you going to be over or not? Or are you going to fulfill the mitzvah that is or not?
Like if you eat matzah with an egg.
So there's different examples. So there's different examples. So the Gemara later in Masechet Pesachim will speak about different examples. There's an example of a person that soaked matzah in water, so he's not eating matzah the way it usually is eaten. It's wet, it's moist. Or a person that wraps matzah in some other wrapping, and the matzah that he doesn't eat the matzah regularly. And the Gemara actually says that by matzah, you're yaitzi even if you just swallow the matzah. A person doesn't chew the matzah. He places the matzah in his mouth and somehow swallows the matzah without even tasting it. You're yaitzi the mitzvah of matzah. The only reason you're not yaitzi when you wrap the matzah in something is because it didn't even touch your mouth at all. But if it touches your mouth and you don't read it in the regular way, you don't even chew it, you're yaitze. So it's mashma that when it comes to mitzvahs, you'll be yaitze the mitzvah without doing it in the regular way of eating. Even though the Torah uses the term achila regarding matzah, that you have to eat it. But yet you're yaitze even without doing it in the regular way. That's what it seems like. But on the other hand, if you soak matzah in water, you're not yaitze. Because then the issue is not only that you're not eating it in the regular way, it's not even considered to be matzah anymore. The whole heftzah of the matzah changes. It's not matzah anymore. So you're not yaitze the mitzvah of matzah. But the Mishnah Lamelech brings this up. Many achreinim speak about this ba'arichas. Mitzvahs lav lahanisnitna, right? That's it. Oh, exactly. So mitzvahs are different than isurim. The whole basis of an isur is the hana shabayis. So the hana has to be in the regular way. But mitzvahs which are not given for hana, as long as you eat it, as long as it goes down in your mouth and your throat, even when not in the regular way, you're yaitze the mitzvah. Yeah, that's a svara to distinguish between isurim and mitzvahs.
But you could say even if mitzvahs lav lahanisnitna, if you don't have hana,
it's not the act, maisa achila. It's not called achila. That's the shaila. Yeah, okay.